So today we'll be hearing from Sarah Ray, and Sarah is coming to us from MoneySmarts. And if you don't know what MoneySmarts is, it is a resource that is available to you as an IU Indianapolis student. And it's one that you probably should start kind of thinking about utilizing, or at least thinking about the tool set that they have. Sarah's going to explain a little bit more about that. And we'll talk about budgets and all those other great things. So if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat. Sarah, take it away.
Well, wonderful. Thank you for having me. So I'm going to go ahead and, before I get started, so I don't forget to do this, drop our MoneySmarts website link in the chat. Feel free to go and take a look even while I'm presenting. There's some wonderful resources on our website. That's also where you can request services from us, sign up for appointments. I'll be going through all of that information as I go through the presentation of how you can interact with MoneySmarts and the Office of Financial Wellness and Education. So I'm going to go ahead and start this presentation up and share my screen. Let's see. Give me 1 second because my screens are not set up correctly at the moment. Okay. All right. So, like Tabitha said, we are.
I don't know, but we're seeing your presentation screen, so I don't know if you want.
Are you not? Okay.
Yeah, we are seeing it, but we're seeing both screens.
You're seeing both screens.
Slide
Interesting. So you're seeing. Okay. Let me try that again then.
No worries. I know how it is. I've got like 3 screens going myself, and
yeah, at all times. Okay. Then let me do this. Let me. Should be. Try. Okay. So it wants. Okay. This is going to be weird, but I think it wants to see screen 1, not screen 2. So let me try. Let me try this real quick, y'all.
Go for it.
Okay.
That's just showing us your background.
Yeah, so it should really start up here. Okay. And is it the correct screen now?
Yep, that's it.
Okay, perfect. All right. So as Tabitha said, we are widely known as MoneySmarts across the whole IU system. We also are referred to as the Office of Financial Wellness and Education. So those 2 names are synonymous. If you hear either of them, that's us. So I serve as the Associate Director of the program and get to work with wonderful undergraduate and graduate students like you all across the whole entire IU system, serving every single campus. So our big mission is to help you understand your money, make informed financial decisions, establish healthy money habits, all in service of achieving your educational goals and working towards a thriving future. So you have some wonderful tools and resources available to you, already paid for through your student fees from our office. So I always want to encourage students to take advantage of these wonderful services while you're here in school, because they become pretty pricey once you leave school. The other thing I always want to note, though, for students is that we also serve early alumni. So as long as you have a current account set up with IU for the couple of years that you're out of IU, you can continue to sign up for appointments and utilize financial wellness and education services from our office. So to kind of preview what this presentation is, I like to think of the kind of starting point of exploring financial wellness as a choose your own adventure. And so I picked out these kind of four buckets of where it could be a starting path for any graduate student. There's so many issues to explore in personal finance that it becomes really overwhelming. But at a baseline, I want our students during their time at IU to feel comfortable building a spending plan and a budget, building savings goals, building healthy credit, and then building a plan for your financial life after IU and your financial life in service to your larger life goals and dreams. So I have a question for all of you. How's your financial life today? So you can go ahead and let's see. I don't know if I'm going to be able to see it at the moment because of how I have my screen set up. Let me see. I think, oh, here we go. If you write in the chat, give me like a one word or phrase answer or an emoji. I love that, of how your financial life is today. So we've got kind of the wacky face, scary, meh, okay, upside down face, yep. So I remember feeling all of that when I was in grad school. So I did my master's degree and PhD coursework at Iowa State University. And I was studying financial counseling and planning while being on assistantship and feeling very poor. And so I think my one word phrase would have been cognitive dissonance because I was, living on assistantship, not able to apply everything I learned because I just didn't have enough money to apply everything. So yeah, so we've got a lot of kind of responses indicating either ambivalence, mixed feelings, scary. That's really normal as a grad student. And I definitely felt all of those things. Um, all right. Let me go ahead and, oh, this, okay, there we go. So what's always interesting in conversations that I have with students and really everyone, professional staff, I also meet with faculty to talk about their finances, is that the actual state of our finances doesn't always match how we feel. Sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. So as I'm going through all of this, I want you to think about what quadrant would you place yourself in right now. So along the horizontal axis, this is what your actual like quantifiable financial state would be. So if we looked at your checking account right now, any assets that you owned, the debt you owe, if we laid that all out in a financial plan or in an Excel spreadsheet, we could get some numbers to quantifiably say, this is how we would rate you in terms of your actual financial state. And so it could be from actually bad to actually really good. But often what holds us back from making decisions is is how we're feeling about our finances, whether we're feeling really good or feeling really bad, and how that matches up with the actual state of our finances. So in quadrant one, this is where your feeling about your finances, generally speaking, matches up pretty well with the actual quantifiable state of your finances. So you're feeling very confident, you know what you're doing. By and large, what I find is that a lot of graduate students and even just a lot of people end up in one of the other states. So I tend to live sometimes more in quadrant two. Right now, as someone with a salary, where my finances are pretty good. But man, if I have anything go wrong where I have to dip into my emergency fund or I can't save and invest as much as I want, it makes me incredibly anxious. At the root of that for me is I grew up in a household that where my parents faced a lot of job insecurity, and high levels of financial stress. I also grew up in some very, very poor areas of the country. And so just all of that information from my background makes me feel really, really anxious if anything goes even a little bit wrong and I have to use money to solve the problem. Even if things are actually really good and I'm using my emergency fund for emergencies and for that safety net and it's doing what it's supposed to do. We have some people who, you know, things might actually be pretty bad. And that is something that I work with students to identify. Are things actually pretty bad? And like, where are you on that, the actual bad feeling then? Are you defeated, despondent, resigned? How can we get you into an emotional state where you can start taking action, even if things are pretty bad? What resources can we find? And then quadrant four is always one of the hardest places for me as a financial counselor to work with people, is when things are actually pretty bad, but you're feeling good. So a typical client profile of that would be someone who's going into a lot of debt, but they're deciding to ignore that debt in order to fund whatever is going on in their lives. And so they're choosing to live with ignorance, not look at their account statements. And we don't love that. So I would way prefer someone was in quadrant three than in quadrant four, because at least, you know, the feeling makes sense. And so think about for a moment where you are and like where realistically you think you can move in these quadrants. All right, so a few things to frame our discussion a little bit. There's so many variables that impact your financial life, and no one's financial life is exactly the same. Personal finance is personal. It's why our office is set up the way that it is, that we do these group types of presentations. But ultimately, what we want for IU students is that you come and meet with our staff one-on-one so we can help you figure out a plan. So definitely your age, you're graduate students right now, so that's going to mean that you're probably working with less resources right now because you're choosing to go to school at least part-time, maybe full-time, and forego higher earning potential for right now. Whether or not you have dependents, your career level, how much debt you're carrying, maybe including student loan debt, and if you're taking on more, your relationship status, and this can go for if you have a partner, but also if you have other family members. So when I was in grad school, my younger sister lived with me. She wasn't dependent on me. She had parental support, but she was in undergrad and living with me while I was in grad school, and I did still help her with various financial issues and then just overall support. And then geographic location, that matters a lot in terms of the cost of living, but also how much social support do you have? So a really important thing to remember is your situation isn't exactly like anyone else's situation, and not to compare yourself too much to anyone else around you. So go ahead and type a goal that you have for yourself while you're here at IU, or just after IU, that requires money. How can we save for retirement while in grad school is a question that came up. Yeah, I'll definitely make sure that we address that question. Getting out of student loan debt is a goal. Okay. Anyone else want to share a goal? Save for your children's college education. That's phenomenal. There are some specific types of accounts that we have information on our website about called 529 accounts that you can learn about. I want to feel more comfortable negotiating raises. Yeah, definitely. That is, oh, it's a rough one, even for those of us that work around money. Broadly, financial stability. I love that. And financial stability can take so many forms. Okay, so please feel free to keep sharing goals. Oh, emergency fund for moving, travel funds, wonderful. So yeah, those are some awesome goals. I think this presentation will at least get you started in thinking about what you can do towards them, and then at least know where to go in terms of working with our office to work even more on them. So let's see, let me make sure I'm on. Okay. So some of those goals that you presented, I think the two core basic skills that are important to work on in order to achieve your goals are budgeting and saving. So I like to break down all personal finance terminology in the most neutral way possible. We have a lot of both positive and negative connotations tied to money related terms and personal finance related terms that for some of us can kind of keep us in a frozen state of not taking action or making decisions. And so you'll kind of hear me use some of this language that I try as much as possible to provide you neutral definitions. So budgeting is a process for matching your money inflows and your money outflows for a specified period of time. So those money inflows could be from current earnings. They could be from a fellowship or a grant or a scholarship. They could be from student loans that you're borrowing or some type of support from a loved one. It can take so many forms. And your outflows, again, it's anything that you are spending money on, but an outflow can also be saving. So when we set up a budget, we actually, if we are setting money aside for the future, we end up treating that like an expense because saving is foregoing current consumption-based spending in order to set money aside for future you. So future you is then going to use that pot of savings as current inflows of money. So you might have some money set aside that you're using during grad school that you're using as current income because someone in your life, you or someone else in your life, set money aside for future you that you're able to use now. So that's the fun thing about money is that we get to move it around in time. We don't use it all in the present. We can either borrow it from our future selves or we can save and invest for our future selves. To get started with a budget, really to get started with a budget is a multi-month process for most people. And that can feel really, really intimidating, but it doesn't have to be intimidating. There are a lot of really great tools that will help support you, including I will point out that we have an amazing online learning platform called Cash Course that all IU students can sign up for free. And once you sign up, you can use a tool called the Budget Wizard, where you can plug in categories and numbers, and it will produce a Excel spreadsheet for you. You don't have to input any formulas. You don't have to know what you're doing with Excel. It'll do all of the work for you. And so that's a really, really great tool. There's also great budgeting apps. Our office is able to give students more paper-based forms if that's the preference. All sorts of great tools to get started. But at the core of it, what is usually helpful for most people, if you are rather new to budgeting or you really need to do a deep dive assessment of your budget, is the first step is to pick a month. So November is coming up here really soon, so you could pick November and create a projected budget. That's where you're simply going to guess what your income is going to be, what your expenses are going to be, and how much you think you will be saving if you're working towards any saving. So pure guesses are completely okay at this stage. Then you set that projected budget aside and you simply track all of your spending, everything that's coming in and everything that's going out, but especially the spending in as much detail as you possibly can for that entire month. You're then going to compare the projected budget to what you actually had as income and spending. You're trying to figure out if you ran a deficit, meaning that your outflows were greater than your inflows, if you have a surplus, meaning you have money left over, or if you are kind of spot on in your projected budget. Once you've done that comparison, you can start determining what do you want to change. So if you're facing a deficit, are there changing habits that, or are there spending habits that you want to change? Do you need to start looking for new income sources to meet certain spending goals and needs? But then even if you're running a surplus or spot on, that's a great opportunity to assess, are there changes that you can make because you have specific savings goals for the future that you would like to meet, and you'd like to start giving future you money rather than using maybe all of that money currently, or maybe you're not being very purposeful with that surplus, and you can start putting it in a high yield savings account or start investing and earn greater returns on that money. So I usually suggest that people repeat this 1 to 3 times, depending on the time of year. We're headed into November, which has Thanksgiving break. December has the holidays, the new year. Those months can look very, very different. And so you're kind of looking to see, do you have any patterns to your spending? Or are you just kind of all over the place, and maybe you want to develop more habits around your spending rather than just, not having any rhyme or reason to it. And then this is not where I ever want anyone to stay in terms of their budget, because it is pretty time consuming. At the end of the day, there are a lot of great budgeting methods and tools that once you have a handle on who you are as an earner, spender, and saver, those budgeting methods and tools can save you a lot of time. You can really start setting things up based on percentages with automatic payments. And it can really simplify your budgeting. I, in fact, always tend to do this process, though, where I basically call it running a financial audit on myself, typically once a year, for a couple of months, to really do a deep dive into my spending to make sure that I'm on track and I haven't started like spending too much on like subscriptions that I'm not using anymore. And I do an analysis of that. I saw a question come in on the chat, I think. Let's see.
I think it might be share resources.
Wonderful. Yeah, Fidelity has a great budgeting worksheet. Yeah, those look great. Fidelity is one of our IU partners. So Fidelity has some really great resources. Wonderful. Okay. So, let's see. So kind of the thing I want to conclude with when talking about budgeting is once you're in that phase of analyzing your spending, remember that no spending is inherently good or bad, and all of our spending is trying to meet some sort of need. So I very much view spending under Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We're at the core of it. We're trying to meet our survival, security, love and belonging, esteem, or meaning needs, right? If you're spending money on an IU education, you're pursuing meaning for a graduate education. But that can mean then foregoing other spending categories in order to have that more balanced budget and not go into too much debt. So it might mean not being able to spend as much on esteem and love and belonging, those things that like we do more for fun or for social reasons. If we're basically trying to cover survival, security, and then meaning while we're in school. But those needs don't go away. And so often what I'm helping grad students with, undergrads with, is looking at, okay, you're spending this much money on eating out. So what need are you trying to meet? Is it the need for convenience? Is it the need to go out with friends? How can we find a way to still meet that need that costs less money and makes your budget work? So we don't ever want you to deny that you have all of these different needs. It's an analysis of your behaviors that allows you to make the amount of money that you have work for you. All right, emergency funds came up as a goal. So general recommendation for emergency funds is that you have 3 to 6 months of your basic living expenses in an easy to access savings account. This is very much for people that are working full time. For students, it can become tricky to even save up that 3 to 6 months. But for other types of students, might be very necessary if you have dependents or a partner or other life circumstances. So again, this is a general rule of thumb, but working towards having emergency funds is really going to depend on you and what you have available to you. So truly it's an analysis then of all of your short-term and long-term goals and everything, all those expenses you need to meet. When you are building in those emergency funds though, you're going to want to think about building that into your budget as a specific outflow. So it looks like you are removing that money from your current income, and it basically ends up looking like an expense line in your budget. So as far as credit, I know a lot of grad students have the experience with already being users of credit, whether that's borrowing student loans or having a credit card, having an auto loan. You are a user of credit, and there's very healthy ways to use credit, and there's less advantageous ways of using credit. Two big things that you want to know the difference between and have a handle on are your credit report and your credit score. So if you are a user of credit, if you are a borrower, you have credit reports with each of the 3 credit reporting agencies, which I'll explain in a minute. But a credit report is essentially like your college transcript or your graduate school transcript. It's a comprehensive record of your history of using credit, and all of the different sources of credit that you've had, whether that's credit cards or installment credit like student loans or auto loans. There is a line for each account that you have had open, even if it's closed now, in the past 7 to 10 years on your credit report. And it's going to show, have you made on-time payments? How much do you currently owe? All of this different information that a future lender might want to see about you. A credit score then is a numerical representation of what is on that credit report. It's basically equivalent to your GPA. So just like a GPA is a numerical representation of your transcript, a credit score is a numerical representation of your credit report. It goes from 300 to 850, with higher being better, but there is a caveat to that that I will explain. That credit score is used by lenders as well as a few other types of companies and potentially employers to determine how creditworthy or even how trustworthy you are in terms of borrowing money or being an employee or being someone who would be good to insure. So on the credit report front, you can check your credit report once a week at the website that is annualcreditreport.com. So it's annualcreditreport.com because by federal law, consumers used to only be able to check each of their 3 credit reports once per year. That got updated during the pandemic and kind of stuck, that you can now check your credit report from each of the 3 credit reporting agencies, Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax, once per week. So you always have 3 credit reports from 3 different credit reporting companies. When you go to annualcreditreport.com, that website looks like it might be a scam, and it is in fact not a scam. That website, like, it was created, I think back, it looks exactly the same as it looked in the 1990s and early 2000s. It's barely changed. But that is the only website you want to go to, annualcreditreport.com. So when you're looking up your credit report, you probably don't need to do that weekly, but a couple times a year is a good idea. You want to make sure that the information you see there is what you expect, that you own all of those credit accounts, and there's nothing suspicious. Credit reports are the best way to detect any identity theft or fraud where your credit information or your identity has been stolen. Most of the time when your identity is being stolen, it's so that those fraudsters can steal your information in order to borrow money.
Sarah, I
Yes.
dropped this in the chat, but I have a personal
Oh
story.
yeah, absolutely.
So earlier this year, Dr. Hardy's credit got my identity was stolen. It was from someone that applied for a student loan to a school in New Orleans, and I was like, "Oh my goodness, it's not me. I got 3 degrees, but but that person was able to steal my identity and take out not only loans for the spring semester, but also for the fall semester. So it was about $16,000 that was like coming from my credit or whatever. Or the only reason I found out about it was because I was getting those credit alerts and I was checking my credit regularly. So I do say check your credit, and I drop that link in the.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And it can happen to any of us. I now know through having through one of my credit cards, I have identity theft detection set up my social security through one of the recent data breach, my social security number through a recent data breach. I think I know which one it was. I think it was that background check company from a few years ago. My information is on the dark web. So I know that my information could probably be sold and stolen so easily. And so I have to be very vigilant about checking my credit reports, and then having identity theft detection turned on. So definitely really important to remember to do that.
And you can freeze your credit until you need it.
Yes,
So,
and you can freeze your credit, exactly. In fact, we recommend that everybody keep their credit frozen, except for when you actually need to unfreeze it in order to apply for a loan and get approved. And so if you want to learn about freezing your credit and what that looks like, definitely set up a one-on-one appointment. Our staff can help you navigate that process. So last thing on credit scores, I'm not going to dive into this too deeply because there's a few other things that I want to make sure we get to with the time that we have. Generally speaking, I tell people to make sure that they're working on their healthy credit behaviors, and that will mean your score is taken care of. Your score is a reflection of what you're doing as a borrower. And so the goal isn't to optimize the score. You don't need to get to an 850 credit score. I'm not at an 850 credit score. Generally speaking, being above 700 is good. 750 and above is really good. When you're in the 800s, what that actually means is you have a lot of various diverse sources of credit open, and you're using it pretty consistently. So lenders actually want to see you borrowing quite a bit so that they can lend you more. So they incentivize borrowing more in how these credit scores are set up. You don't really need to worry about doing that, generally speaking. If you have a 775 credit score, you're probably going to get very similar interest rates to if you had an 820 credit score, in terms of when you go out to most lending markets. So you're aiming for the very good range, the good to very good range. You might then jump into excellent once you're out in the working world. If you have to travel a lot for your job and you're using a travel credit card, that's kind of where I tend to hover right now, with the amount of travel that I do at times. So generally speaking, what you're aiming for is you want to make sure that you are paying at least the minimum balance on time every single month. So the minimum payment on any loans, and the minimum payment on your credit cards. If you're doing at least that, that counts as 35% of your credit score in most cases. One confusing thing to know is there are multiple credit scoring models from two different organizations. So there's the Fair Isaac Corporation, which produces the FICO score, and then the three credit reporting agencies work together to produce something called the Vantage score. Within that, there are multiple credit reporting models. And that's the other thing, there's a specific credit scoring model for credit card lenders, and another for auto lenders, and another for mortgage lenders. And so again, you have more than one credit score. So you could be 720 on one and 752 on another. So again, practice the healthy financial behaviors. Don't worry about your exact score. The other big portion of your credit score is amount owed versus your available credit. This goes into revolving credit, which is primarily credit cards. And so generally speaking, on, say, a credit card, You want to utilize no more than 30% of your available credit. If you can do even less than that, like 10% or less, that's even better. And that goes into something called your credit utilization ratio. So as an example, if you had a single credit card that had a maximum balance of $1,000, you would never want to carry a balance of more than $300 on that card at any given time, or it will start adversely impacting your credit score. Now, all of that being said, I have had credit utilization ratios of more than 30% at times. Like, for example, when I've made big cross-country moves and I've needed to just for a few months put everything on a credit card and then pay it off as I'm going. But I'm probably not at that point worried about getting an auto loan. And so my credit score will recover from that when I no longer have the 30%, over 30% credit utilization ratio. The other things to know, length of credit history, longer is better. If you can, basically want to keep your first credit card open and never close it, generally speaking. Types of credit, that's your credit mix. Again, this is where lenders advantage having lots of different forms of credit, but that can play into, for some people, unhealthy credit behaviors. So generally speaking, you know, it's going to push your score up if you have installment credit and revolving credit, but we don't worry too much about that one. And then new credit applications goes into what is called hard inquiries. Basically, you don't want to apply for too much credit all at once, or that will start impacting your credit score. The exception to that is if you're shopping around for something like a mortgage or an auto loan. In that case, you have a 14-day period by law to shop around for those types of installment credit. And every application you do in that 14-day period will all count as one hard inquiry on your credit report and ultimately go into your credit score. So basically, the idea is if you can have the core thing of making on-time payments and not taking on too much revolving credit all at once, your credit score starts taking care of itself. Okay, so we're gonna talk about a few things about things you might want to know about planning for your future after IU. Briefly, student loan payment. Student loan payment is something that I really encourage you to set up a one-on-one appointment with our staff around and get a plan in place as soon as possible. This is so personal. But we want you to be able to walk away with a plan as you're headed towards graduation from your program, knowing how your payments will work into your budget. There's a QR code here to the federal student loan simulator tool. You can sign in with your FSA ID and the Department of Ed will actually pull in your actual federal student loan data so you can start forecasting what might be possible payments and what your payment plans might look like. Definitely go take a look at that. If it is hard for you to navigate, our staff is really proficient at helping students with this. In terms of private student loans can be trickier than federal. There's less regulation about federal student loans. Sorry, y'all, I just went ahead. So one thing that I've seen with private lenders is that they sometimes will put you on a way extended out payment plan. I had a student once who thought she was on a 10-year payment plan for her student loans. She was in fact on an 18-year repayment plan. And we needed to go take a look at what length of payment plan was best for her. But the reason that the lending company did that is they had basically signed her up for much lower payments, but extended her out to that 18-year payment plan without her realizing it. So they could incentivize her with the lower payments. Basically, make sure that if you have private loans, you know what you're signing up for, and that you can talk to those lenders about what is most advantageous to you. Again, if anything on private student loans confuses you, and they're really confusing, come talk with our staff. We can kind of guide you through those statements, what you might have signed up for without realizing it. Salary expectations. This slide is actually a little more for undergrads. What I always tell grad students, however, is make sure that you're talking to people in the profession and the industry you want to go into. Talk to faculty who have any sort of relationship to that industry about what is the norm for starting salaries in a given area so that you can be informed as you're getting job offers, and you know what you're aiming for, and you can possibly have some wiggle room to negotiate based off of real data. Again, salaries are always hard. They're really hard in this economy too, because it is more of an employer's market versus an employee market right now, where there's more workers wanting jobs than there might be positions. And so this is a time period where it might be a little bit hard to negotiate, but definitely get information about what salaries might be expected in your industry. Looking at current job openings that list salaries in given locations is also really helpful. So one of the things as you're thinking about where you might be living post-graduation is making sure that you understand cost of living. So there's a ton of really wonderful cost of living calculators online that you can Google. Each of them has their quirks, but some really great ones that you would get if you just Googled cost of living comparison or cost of living calculator. One of the things that we want to point out here is that rent and housing is one of those biggest housing categories. So when you're thinking about what your salary might be in a given area, you definitely want to start seeing what your fixed expenses like housing and transportation are going to be. So we looked up, I think these rates might have been from last year when we built this, but average rent for a one-bedroom apartment in Indianapolis was hovering around $1,300 last year. In New York City, you might expect to pay $6,000. In Dallas, you might be expecting somewhere around $1,500 or $1,600. Same in Atlanta. And so having that perspective of like Indianapolis is a much cheaper cost of living area than other major cities where you might get job offers is a really important thing to keep in mind as you're starting to go look at salaries. So if you were expecting, my industry is really headquartered in Seattle, you'd want to set your salary expectations for Seattle and not Indianapolis. Job negotiation things. This is not specifically an area where we provide one-on-one counseling. There's a lot of great career support where you can get job negotiation help across IUI. But generally speaking, there are things that are negotiable, and then there are things that are generally not negotiable. So like I said, salary varies in different industries, how negotiable it is. Your start date might be negotiable. Vacation days, it depends on how PTO and vacation works for different levels in careers. Relocation expenses can be negotiable. Generally, what's not negotiable is your insurance benefits, your retirement benefits, and your holiday and sick leave. But these are all things that you definitely want to get a handle on, that full compensation package, before you accept a job offer. Let's say you get a job offer and you just want to understand what you're being offered in terms of health insurance. And there is a lot of terminology with health insurance, and it's intentionally very confusing. That's again another great place to set up an appointment with one of our staff members. As you're considering housing, again, we talked a little bit about in terms of rent, but there's also this long-term goal of most of us want to buy a house. But thinking about the timing and what you're actually doing when you're buying a house is really important, and all of the costs that go into potentially buying. So generally the rule of thumb around the renting versus buying decision for a specific location is it really only makes sense to consider buying if you're going to live in a specific location for 5 years or more. So if you're thinking, I might only be in this location for a couple years at the start of my career, it might be better to stick with renting and give yourself the freedom of just renting. The big reason for that is that in terms of there's a lot of costs associated with buying and selling a house, and timing of housing markets can get really tricky. And so it's not just the mortgage payment that you need to think about, it's those initial buying costs and the selling costs when you have to sell. And you usually only recoup those costs, generally speaking, if you've lived in a house for 5 years or more. Remember that the main reason to buy a house is to live in it. A house can be an investment, but its main thing you shouldn't think of it as your main investment. We had some pretty amazing economic years across a good chunk of the US that maybe our grandparents lived through, or maybe parents or great-grandparents, where housing really did serve as like you could retire on the equity that was built in a house in some areas of the country. That generally speaking hasn't been true in the last couple of decades. And so just remember that real estate, we can't always expect that it will appreciate in value. So don't treat it like your investment account. And then you want to make sure that you're looking beyond the interest rate on mortgages, beyond that mortgage payment. Property taxes play, and cost of repairing a house, cost of turning it from a starter home to your forever home, really play into the decision. And generally speaking, if you think that you may need to move around pretty consistently for your career, usually renting is the more cost-effective option. Even though, again, we've always been told build equity in property, there might be better avenues for investing that allow you to build more wealth. So keep all of those things in mind. Retirement was mentioned. I could go into a whole spiel on retirement. I love talking about retirement. Generally speaking, there are these 3 buckets of accounts that are either dedicated retirement accounts or can play into your retirement planning. So the 401k, 403b type of accounts are your employer-sponsored accounts. 401ks are offered by for-profit companies. 403bs are usually offered for nonprofits and educational institutions. Your Roth IRA and traditional IRAs, anyone with an income can set those up. The difference between a Roth and traditional is just the tax treatment. A health savings account is intended to pay for health expenses, but you can, if you're ever offered a health savings account, you can use it as a form of retirement account by investing the money. People often get health savings accounts confused with flexible savings accounts. Flexible savings accounts, they're similar, but they don't roll over year. Health savings accounts are specifically offered to people that are enrolled in high deductible health insurance plans, and you can use that money currently to pay health expenses, or you can invest it for future you. Specifically, the way I've used my health savings accounts is I'm saving up for my health expenses in retirement and treating it like one of my retirement accounts. It's wonderful because it also has the most advantageous tax treatment. Again, this could be just retirement is its whole own presentation or really class. So if you have more questions about retirement, our staff is more than happy to help you with that. I'm going to skip these slides. I want to make sure that you know on our website, you can sign up for one-on-one appointments. So we have staff here in Bloomington that you can meet with virtually. We also have one of our highly trained peer financial educators, Nick, he's finishing up his training this week. He will be on board to serve you exclusively at IUI. So he will be able to meet with you either virtually, or if you would prefer to meet in person, Nick is going to be our IUI student financial educator. And he is actually going into wealth management, and he's phenomenal. So yeah, other than that, I mentioned Cash Course. Cash Course is a wonderful tool. It's a self-paced tool. You can go on our website and sign up for Cash Course. So that's what I have for all of you. I will stick around for a few minutes if you want to ask any questions. I'm more than happy to do that. But otherwise, thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That was so informative. I learned a lot for sure. What questions do we have? Feel free to unmute yourself or drop them in the chat.
Mhm.
Hello, my name is Aishika, and I have a
Mhm.
question about IRA accounts,
Okay.
whether Roth IRA or individualized accounts. Could
Mhm.
you go into explaining a bit more what are the pros and cons of each, and even just like good avenues to find or to understand
Yeah,
individualized?
so are you asking specifically about the difference between traditional and Roth?
Yes. IRA
Perfect. Yeah.
accounts, as well as like the pros and like going
Yeah.
into the pros and cons, and even where we can like set up
Where you can set them
accounts
up.
for the
Of course.
individualized accounts. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's start with the traditional versus Roth. The main difference is when you get taxed. So a traditional IRA is set up so that you are contributing pre-tax dollars. That reduces the amount of income that you have to pay taxes on now. But then that money is going to be invested and grow. And then when you make withdrawals in retirement, that's when you owe taxes on the money. Roth is the opposite, that you can contribute after tax dollars. That money then will grow tax-free, and you don't have to pay taxes on the withdrawals. So there's a lot of like reasons you might contribute to a Roth versus a traditional. Generally speaking, the choice, and there's way more to it, especially as people start getting into to higher incomes. The choice often they need support from a financial planner to navigate all of that. There's also just what's called a backdoor Roth. There's a lot to consider if you're at higher incomes. But generally speaking, when you're at a lower tax rate, as many of you probably are right now, it's usually more advantageous to contribute to a Roth versus traditional. So that is because you have the lowest tax rate you might ever have right now. So you can contribute those after tax dollars, and you will probably have a higher tax rate in retirement. And so you'll be able to make those withdrawals tax-free in retirement when you have that higher tax rate. Now, like I said, there's a bunch of nuance to that as you start earning more. And I definitely tell people, start working with a financial planner to really set up your tax and investment strategy because it's so complicated. But for most college students, you can start with a Roth. The advantage is you have more options, typically with IRA. So I'll often get the question, once I'm working for a company, should I max out everything in my employer-sponsored account, like the 401k or 403b, or should I work towards the IRA first? So most of the time, companies will contribute to your 401k or 403b based on a match. So you need to contribute 4% of your salary, and they will contribute 4% of your salary. So you always want to, once you're fully employed, you want to get that employer match. So do that first. And then you can kind of look at your options of, do you like the options you have with an individual retirement account? Or do you like what your employer has set up for you? To get some of the brokerages that you can work with to set up an IRA include companies like Fidelity, Vanguard, TD Ameritrade, Wealthfront, Betterment. There's a whole list. Again, you can do a bunch of Googling to see what you like. I can say Fidelity is our retirement partner here at IU. And they have some really great educational materials that can help you learn as you're investing. They also have a pretty easy to use platform. So Fidelity could be great. There's pros and cons to each company, and I can't tell you specifically which company to work with, but definitely do that exploration. And if you have questions, our peer educators can support you on that.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Sarah, thank you so much. We'll add this recording to our YouTube page, the grad school YouTube page, so you can access
Wonderful.
it anytime. Thank you again, Sarah. We appreciate you. And I think
appreciate you
most
all.
of the questions I tried to answer, or at
Yeah.
least tell them to do a
Yep.
consultation.
Yeah, wonderful. And hopefully you all sign up for appointments.
Thanks. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Mhm.